Hey guys, today I'm sitting down with Jackson, who was a second year, 8-year clinical medical student at the Shanghai Medical College of Fudan University at the time we had this conversation in August of 2022. Like me, Jackson is a huge soccer fan, and we started chatting after I used Neymar as an example in the second debate we did together. He's also the Fudan English Debating Society president, a two-time quarterfinalist at the Foreign Language Teaching and Research Press Cup National English Debating Competition, as well as part of the two Fudan teams that nearly broke into the elimination rounds at the 2022 World Universities Debating Championship. In this chat, he talked about his experience in and tips for learning English, debating, and studying, how he deals with stress during his high school, college days, and during COVID, his path to choosing medicine, and his future plans amidst other things. So I learned a lot from Jackson, and I hope you could take away some of the things that he said. How about let's go straight into it, actually.
Yeah, sure.
Let's see
Okay,
what you
okay.
think. Because like we're talking about like debating anyways. So
Debate, yeah.
yeah, maybe
Mhm.
you could like share how you got into debating, like what your journey was like.
I actually got into debating relatively late. I do know
Mm.
that a lot of people I partnered with started in high school. Like one of the seniors in the society, he started back in like junior high. So back in high school, I only took part in like mock trial, like model UN, these sort of
Right.
things. And when I entered college, I thought about like whether there was anything I could do to like kind of demonstrate your prowess or your like abilities to communicate and like just like semi academically in English, because I think it's relatively important for medical students because we do put a lot of emphasis on whether you can read, write, and convey your like academic materials very fluently, and that's what your teachers, your mentors, and like people at the lab um,
Mhm.
are actually putting a lot of emphasis on. They would like so basically I needed something to like participate in and get something. So it was a very practical objective, and I thought about it, and
Right.
I was like I happened to be recommended by Helena, which was like the instructor
Yeah.
at
At that.
at the yeah at FED. So
Right.
so it's kind of like a very practical objective that got me into debate. And after I got into it, I actually realized that I really liked this kind of feeling. It's a lot better than like a lot of the experiences I had in high school. So yeah.
Even better than like, because I never mock trial. I've only heard of it. Like I never knew know what like it's about.
I think mock trial. I think mock trial is actually kind of similar to debate in a lot of senses, but there's a lot of performance involved because you have to play attorney and then you have to play witness. So there's a lot
Mm.
of teams that like got an advantage because they were actually better performers instead of like better logical thinkers. So I think debate is a lot of is kind of a lot more logically oriented in that sort of sense. So and I think that's what's actually appealing to people who care more about the content of what you say instead of how you actually deliver it.
Right. How about like in terms of partnership? Like, well, in MUN, I don't know if you ever prep with your teammates or like people from your same school or like mock trial. Do you prep for that like with teammates?
Uh, Yeah, I prep with my teammates like before every event. Like in mock trial, basically you have like direct confrontations with your own witnesses and you have cross confrontations with your like opponents' witnesses. And for the directs, it's basically rehearsed. You have like you write your own scripts and that sort of thing after you review the affidavit. And for Model UN, it's a lot more like impromptu because there's a lot of things
Yeah.
going on. There's a lot of people, and but you still have like you go through the things you write with your partner. So that's sort of like a prep thing. I think it's relatively different in debate or with these two sort of forms.
So in debate then, I guess then first years, so you've only debated like, not legitly, but like
2 years.
for 2 years.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So in the 2 years, I guess you partnered up. How many partners have you had? Like how many people have you? teamed up with, or has it like more or less stayed the same, like the partner?
I actually have like 4 partners in
Right.
total, like in 2 years. Each for a different time span. So
Mm.
the first was like when I first got into debate, Feds has this tradition where they pair like newbies, they pair these people up, and I was
Uh-huh.
paired up with a student from international relations.
Mm.
So I think it was actually a very good partnership overall. We were both like new to debate, but he was very enthusiastic as well, and we happened the fact that we happened to be from 2 completely different
Mhm.
studies, it actually helps debate. Like we knew different like fields and areas, we had different interests, and we actually had a very like we had a name that seemed cool to us at the time, but now kind of it's just kind of dumb. We called ourselves human studies because basically, med students and like international
Right.
relations, social studies, they study different aspects of
That
like
was your team name.
humans. Yeah, that was our team name.
Okay.
And yeah, so that was actually very interesting, and that's what got me into debate, like really interested into it, because there was a
Mm.
lot of times we would have long discussions after the match about like after training about like what we could have done better, like how this there used to be like conversations about like if it wasn't a debate, what would you support and why,
Mm.
this sort of thing.
Right.
And
Uh-huh.
it's really like I, I think it was really good atmosphere. And then later that year, because there was nationals, and Feds also had this tradition of teaming people who didn't really know each other up, because like they excelled in the school qualifying match, and then that's where I got qualified. That's where I got teamed up with like Cassie, and I don't know if you
Oh,
know her.
okay.
She's like she's a senior. She's like a
Is she
senior.
like the vice president, or is she the president? I
Yeah,
don't know.
she's a president now.
She's the president
So
now, right? Okay.
yeah, she's also from like foreign languages. She's
Right.
from the English department,
Right.
and that was my second partner. And we had like a very competitive run for the FLTRP nationals. And my third partner overall was actually Isaac, because over over the entire school year, like in my first school year, I got to know him, and he was like also my senior
Mm.
in
Right.
medical. So for like in my like second year, in the first term of my second year, there was a lot of international debates, and he thought like we could team up and try give that a try. And overall, I think that was also um, he was like by far the best debater I've ever seen. So teaming up with him was something that's really easy. Like in discussions, he was always one step ahead. So I think that was actually really cool. And my like most recent partner is Daisy, who like we both know, and that was a very unique experience as well. So basically, 4 partners.
Daisy and I were talking about like when we were talking about like she said she was like, you're at least like five. She's got to have like at least another 5 years till she catches up with you, and then God knows how many years with Isaac. So I wonder like, I wanted to know like how about like when you teamed up with Isaac, I suppose like what's like that, being the president himself and like and everything, like a great debater, like because she says like Daisy says like you think like many times quicker than she does. A lot of times she has to understand the complicated case like you think of. She's like within those 15 minutes, and you say Isaac is like an even quicker thinker, which I guess, well, yeah, I suppose that,
It's true.
right.
Yeah.
So I suppose like, yeah, how does that work? Like I guess in yeah.
It works very similar to like what Daisy. First off, I don't think that there's like that much of a discrepancy between Daisy and I. Sometimes she gets very good cases that I like also have to understand a little. With
Right.
Isaac, it's very similar to like the experience that's like she's subjectively saying on her side. It's very similar. Basically, we used to have this like kind of arrangement where we have 15 minutes prep. So for the first 5 minutes, we would like think by ourselves, think about like what points we could have, and then after 5 minutes done, we would have a quick exchange of opinions and start building our cases together. And that arrangement didn't work out quite nicely, because
Okay.
it soon came to us that like in 5 minutes, basically Isaac could think of the main cases that we were going to build on our side, and then simultaneously he could preempt some of the opposition's cases. So basically, 5 minutes. Because he was a much faster thinker, and basically our ideas are very similar. There's nothing I could contribute to like building this case. Basically, it's all his ideas, and I think basically it worked like that for like a long time. But then we realized that there's when people have like different some people are just like they understand emotion quicker and they build cases quicker, so it's actually more efficient for people to just have dialogues, just like start off with a conversation about what you think of this motion. That way, like basically one can inspire like the other debater, and in this case you can get like a lot of good ideas of your own. If Because like getting to know emotion is more like about like kind of browsing in your own mind bank about like what I do know about this sort of stuff, and how I can construct this case accordingly. So sometimes the reason we can't really think very quickly, or we're not as agile when we're building our cases, is just because you don't really know what the real life problem is like. So I think a very simple solution is sometimes Isaac is just going to tell me what he actually knows about this sort of stuff, and then I'm like, oh, so that's how it works. And then like these light bulbs just like go on a lot quicker after that.
Right. So, because yeah, I mean, for myself, I never had in the only like competition BP one back when I 4 years ago. Like we never had any tactics. Our tactic was to lose, basically. We tried not to, but that was what we did.
No.
But then like after like coming to Fudan, then I like Caroline, when she first partnered up with me, she was like, okay, let's do like 5 minutes of brainstorming on our own and let's come together. And that's what I did with everyone from that point onwards. And then so it's quite surprising to hear you now talking about it, and that actually doesn't work for probably Isaac and you, and you just go straight into that like discussion, I suppose.
Yeah, it's kind of different. It's unique with every partnership. I think Caroline did that because like her last partner was also like they kind of brainstormed. It's kind of like the go-to model when we do this sort of thing. Yeah.
So with like maybe other teammates, was it like the same, like with Cassie or Daisy, or what was it like?
I think with Cassie or Daisy, it was like 5 minutes of alone time and then just discussions. I think that could work because basically we would have cases that would amend like our partners, because like we were relatively slow thinkers, and in 5 minutes we can't really cover the entire case. So I think in that sort of sense it actually worked. For I think for Cassie it was actually very unique, because back then I didn't really have this sort of ability to construct cases quickly enough. So more often, because I was her second speaker, so more often it was like she would like go through her own case for her first speech, and then for my second speech I'm going to take the extra time, like the extra 14 minutes of her speaking and the opposition speaking before. I'm going to make a lot of amendments to my own case, and then I have a decent case like after she talks. So basically during our discussion she wouldn't really know the full extent of what I'm going to say, because I don't really know it myself. So that was also a very interesting model of like what it could be like. People complain you don't get enough prep time in BP. I think there's an arrangement, as long as like you're not like opening government or something. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, 15 minutes. Well, I struggled like really badly. Like I was back then.
Exactly.
Right. Actually, talking about like first and second speakers, you tend to be like the second one. Because with Daisy, you were the first one, actually. I think I don't.
I was the first one. Yeah, with Daisy, I was the first one.
And with Isaac too, right?
Yeah, with Cassie, I was the second, and with my first partner, I was also second speaker.
Right. So you switched it up, I guess.
Yeah, because I was actually fine with all kinds of arrangements. Really, I think I'm adaptive in that sort of sense.
Right. So I guess you sort of evolved. Like back then you had to become like this second speaker. You had to so-called take more time to like prep, and then you're fine with just just starting off with like 15 minutes now?
Yeah, I think it's very different mindset because there were very practical reasons why I had to be second speaker because yeah, as you mentioned, it's mainly because I was slow at constructing speeches. But
Mm,
also like when you get to become first speaker, um, there's there's also like simplicity in the sense that basically there's less rebuttals you have to give. It's more about constructing your own cases. And I think it's just kind of like I don't know if my skills evolved as a debater, but it's more like an understanding of how like these speech orders work. I think for the first speaker, you have to focus more on your own case. You can't leave a lot of spaces. It's more about efficiency. You have to use like signpost languages to get your ideas to the judge as quickly as possible and get as many points covered as possible. For second speaker, it's more about engagement. And that was actually something I couldn't really do very well in my first year, like whether it was with Cassie or with my first partner. It was something I struggled with because it was very hard to like both prep your own points and listen to what the opposition has to say at the same
mhm,
time. So basically the roles are different, and it just occurred to me recently that like as a second speaker, it's also very efficient if you build your rebuttals or like if you construct your points based on what opposition says. And basically I think either in debate or in like just regular conversations or academic dialogues, it all works like that. Like engagement is very important, and sometimes you don't have to hurry about like coming up with your own ideas. It could be just about a very like useful engagement with people who don't really agree with you.
mhm. Right. About like the skill sets, like there's like one thing like really stood out to me first time I heard you speaking, like was like your,
Mhm.
like these like nonstop, like that nonstop style of like just coming out with these arguments. It's like I could
Uh-huh.
hear your brain clicking away. Like, but you said you were a slow thinker, so so I guess like that came with practice, or even when you were a slow speaker, you still spoke like that, or yeah, I wonder how you developed
Oh,
that
yeah.
skill, if I could call that.
Well, I think generally the ability to convey your thoughts in a logical way, it basically has to do with like your flow of thought. So basically, if you're thinking in a critical way, it doesn't really matter how quickly you come up with your points, as long as you have like a full logical chain once you form them. So I basically I think I am relatively slow when it comes to like brainstorming and that sort of stuff. I need people to inspire me, but um, when I'm thinking of these thoughts, I think it's actually a very good habit. And personally, I do find a lot of appeal in like thinking in a more logical and critical way. And when you actually do come up with your points like that, and then you deliver it to other people, I think it naturally comes off as something that's rather logical. You're talking in a sequential order, one, two, three,
Mhm.
four, and essentially my evidence is this, my link is that, and finally this is my claim, and my impact are blah 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 blah. So basically that's how a point is formed. And I don't know if it comes through practice. I think it does because but not just in the debate context. I think
Right.
either in when you're like reading academic materials, you're like studying a subject, or so whenever thinking is involved, I think it's like basically they're all chances to train this sort of logical abilities. Like in debates, people like teachers teach you the most basic Toomey model is about like a triangle, a tripod under which you have your evidence, your link, and then your claim. You have to have all
Mhm.
three in order to do this sort of thing. And when you're reading an article, like in your own academic field, it's also very similar to that sort of thing. Basically, you review like what the evidence is, and like you kind of think about exactly how it links to his or her claim, and then you kind of review like how can I like what how can I build upon what he or she said, like, or what this kind of research is doing, and exactly how credible, or yeah, just exactly how credible this sort of material really is. And I think like when you're getting used to thinking about all of these things in a very sequential order, it actually comes very naturally when you're talking about this sort of thing. You're also more organized.
I suppose that's what you do like for medicine as well, then.
Yeah, I think these two are like transferable skills. You can
Right.
apply some of that stuff to, um, yeah, your own like academic field.
Let's talk about, I didn't include this in the questions. I'm just
Hmm.
interested. Like, how about
Yeah,
like
sure.
your high school or like I guess junior high school days? Like, how about like studying? Like, do you have any
Hmm.
like specific like I guess tips or stuff to get to do what you're doing now? Like you must have, your grades have to be pretty decent. So I wonder like talking about like this chain of thought mode of thinking, like are there
Oh,
other I guess, yeah, tips or whatever.
um, actually, I have to be frank because in like middle school and high school, I wouldn't call myself like a really hard worker. So basically,
Mm,
there are a lot of things that like high achievers do. A lot of things like they do a lot of like they kind of do quizzes, problems like after school. They give themselves extra excitement. They like study nonstop. I don't think that's actually kind of my model because basically for me it's kind of like just um I just don't really have a lot of specific things that I have to do in order to like just, like get better grades or that sort of thing. But I think it's actually very important like when you're learning something, and that just basically applies to studying at all levels. It's just trying to understand or trying to evaluate just exactly how much or to what extent you're really understanding what you're learning. So it basically it especially holds true for like natural sciences and that sort of stuff where you have like a theoretical like you have a theoretical framework for whatever you're learning, like whether it's geometry or like chemistry or that sort of thing, and everything you're learning is just basically built upon on top of that sort of differently because like when you have math and physics, that's basically a lot of calculations. In chemistry and biology, you have a lot of informations you have to remember, but basically I think it works for like it's holds true for a lot of people that when you're going through these materials the first time, it seems very intuitive and like you think this stuff is actually not that difficult. But when you're actually like um, doing your homework or when you're in a test or when your teacher quizzes you about something, you realize, oh, I actually don't really know this material like to the heart, or like I thought I understood, but in fact I really didn't. So I think that's where like your logical thinking actually comes in. It's about like evaluating what you've learned. Exactly like I do know this claim, I do know this theorem, but
mhm.
exactly like how it was derived or how it actually can apply to like what kind of problems it can be applied to. Do I really know this stuff? If it doesn't, then I think it's very important to actually identify these things. If it doesn't, then it's going to bug you. So if it bugs you, you're going to like spend more time learning about the stuff you actually don't understand. If you don't understand, you can ask your classmates, your teachers, etc. I think that's one of the few like things I can call tips or good advice, like in terms of studying.
Right. I'm just nodding. Like I'm just trying to act like I understand because I don't study science. And then I'm
No,
trying to
actually, I think it applies to all subjects, even like when you learn like literature or like social science and this sort of stuff. But I don't really know about like any of that either because like growing up, I was just basically educated in natural sciences and basically I'm illiterate when it comes to like a lot of the literature and language stuff.
I wonder then how about like in terms of English or yeah, in terms of language?
Hmm.
Like when did you dip your toes into like and started like English?
Uh, well, I think it was actually like what really was a boost was like when my dad actually he like spent 1 year as a visiting scholar in like in the
Mm,
US, so he took me
right.
along, and that happened to be during my like primary school or like elementary,
Mhm.
or so that was during like a very I think there's like a critical period for language. I'm not really sure, but
Yeah.
I do think like
Yeah, you
if
could
you
be a
get
linguist,
it,
right?
yeah, if you get exposed to like the foreign language and you actually use a lot, and that just kind of becomes embedded into your ways of thought. So I think it's about like starting early. So I spent 1 year in the US at a very young age, and um, I think later on it just made my language courses a lot easier overall, I think. Yeah. And jumping into it was actually because I think this is actually kind of interesting because when you actually learn a foreign language in a native environment and then you go back to, for instance, China, and then you take tests like language like capability tests in a Chinese school like academic context, you don't necessarily excel. There's like for instance, they focus a lot more on grammar and this sort of this sort of thing.
The rules.
And yeah, so at first it was also a bit hard to adapt, but I think what really like got me to do better in this sort of test also was like I'm not actually sure really. I think it was just a lot more emphasis by my teachers on this like a lot of these rules, and also like by reading a lot more than you speak, because I think like back in primary school I did a lot of talking, but there could be a lot of grammatical errors that people just overlooked in that. But when you're like getting into the habit of reading more and like writing more, I think a lot of these things just correct themselves, and I think that worked in my case.
You went to the US when you were aged like
7 or 8.
7 or 8.
Yeah, 7 or 8. Yeah, and spent 1 year there.
Quite interesting, because I feel like I was gonna say like you learn, I don't know, maybe people learn in different ways. Like you said you were an active like speaker, but then you might have made like a lot of mistakes, and then reading and writing was what helped you, get to realize those mistakes. But I thought like, having that courage to speak up, I always thought like that was like the key, because I don't exactly remember like what, I did as well. Of course, like I guess we all did our load of, well, speaking, writing, listening, everything. But then what is like that key component? I guess I don't really remember that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think but it's basically like the scenarios are different. I think it also holds true that people say like you have to have the courage to speak in order to kind of really use this language really fluently, and like so you can use it in spontaneous speech. I think that's also another aspect, but I think fortunately I had the chance to like speak up more, like fitting into a new linguistic environment at a very young age, so that wasn't like much of a problem. And basically I'm like very talkative in nature, so it basically like learning to speak up wasn't really much of a problem. It was about like speaking correctly or doing that sort of thing. But I think for like people, if you're learning in a foreign context, if you're like learning English in China, then probably you do have to speak more, because it's about like if you don't really speak, then the chances are that you're also not going to do a lot of reading and writing either, because they're kind of like more time consuming. I don't know if that's true, because it's not really like I don't actually know a lot about this stuff like linguistics and learning these sort of things.
I don't.
Education.
I'm an English major, so that's a problem for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
But then reading, like, because you're still like, you told me like you did even Chinese debating, right? And I suppose like well, like we said, like we discussed earlier, before the interview, I guess, about like, you probably knowing a lot more about these different disciplines. So I guess what are your ways of like getting this sort of information? You don't think it was from reading at a young age, or was it just news when you're older?
I think it's about reading, I guess. And it's also about like just having interest in like well, I think when you have interest in something, you necessarily actually read a lot more about this kind of information about this discipline. Personally, that's actually, it happens to be one of the differences between Isaac, like the Fed's president, and I think he reads a lot of news, and that's a lot of like a lot of the information gaps we have in debate. It comes from the fact that I like read considerably less about what's going on in today's world than he does, and he reads a lot about like he's also interested in social sciences and that sort of stuff. So he has like an entire bank of knowledge he can apply into debate. And for me, I think I was basically interested in, well, a lot of disciplines, but mostly um, some natural sciences. So in this case, I think you do really have to read more in order to actually get acquainted with this sort of information. So yeah.
Right. I guess like teaming up with like, teaming up with people like Isaac, like it definitely like makes an impact, positive
Yeah.
influence on you. Right. Because like see when I see you two team up, like I could see a bit of him in you, if that makes sense. I know everyone is individual, is unique, but then
Hmm.
I mean you don't need to like try to be in a way you try to be like him. I mean there are ways we have things that like everyone has things that that are worth learning, from
Hmm.
one another, but then I guess at the same time you have your own style too, right? That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Um yeah, so we talked a lot about like all these like, well, be it debating or studies. Then I suppose that what comes along with that must be like stress. Like I assume, right? Because like I know I couldn't handle that load of like debating and like all this stuff. I'd crack. So I wonder, like, you talked about actually on WeChat, like a scroll through, and then you were talking about like your stress was like self-induced. So is it, or like, do you feel like there is still like external sources of stress or pressure?
Yeah, I think I said like it was self-induced stress mostly because like um it was a very like it was a very unique scenario where we were like locked down in our student flats or in our
Ah,
dormitories,
well,
and at that at that time you do like think a lot about like whether this pandemic is actually really impacting my life, or like is there things I'd rather be doing at this moment, or like whether am I going to get like worse grades because I'm not really studying as hard as I used to, this sort of thing.
mm,
Some of these questions don't really hold true. So I guess partially it partially I think my stress is self-induced. I think that's correct because overall I had like a bit of I was generally a bit anxious about performance in tests and that sort of stuff. But I think there's also the fact that like you mentioned debate, but I personally it's actually weird. I think debate was one of the like stress relieving scenarios in life when you can like just freely talk about what you actually want to say, or like when you have this kind of platform where people actually are willing to listen and engage with you in that sort of sense. It's actually kind of a very rare opportunity. I think debate is actually kind of a luxury in that sense. But there's a lot of external sources of stress. I don't know if it holds true, but I think it does. There's a lot of people who like undergo a lot more stress than I do, like my friends and that sort of thing. But when you enter college and you enter your own major, especially for instance like medicine, people get like pretty competitive in like the I think especially the Chinese context, people get competitive in like doing what they do, but also about like doing extra stuff than others. So it's kind of like dog eat dogs in this sort of sense. Like
doggy
you
dog.
can't really be dog eat dog. So people um, so there is like external pressures like when you're like when you're reading through like your textbooks, or when you're like reading through the papers that are related to like research that you're interested in, you
Mhm.
think about like exactly like how hard this thing can actually be, like especially in research. Like if you want to excel in today's context, you'd find that there's a lot of competition. People get your ideas just virtually like this happens virtually every day. I hear about like your like the work you've been doing has been like people get one step ahead of you and publish an idea that basically you've been like kind of working hard on for months. And I think that kind of pressure kind of just trickles down into like basically everyday learning, because you think about um whether I have the time to do this or that, or whether I have to like just put in like some just a little bit of extra effort into something, and whether that will affect like some other balances like in other walks of life. So I do think stress is something that plays a part, both internal and external, like in my life. That's actually true.
There, that isn't an issue of like academic integrity. I mean, when you said like others, isn't
Oh,
that
actually,
okay?
I think that's just a natural part of academic competition. People do get this. I don't think this happens a lot when like the entire academic society wasn't as competitive as it was like back in the days. But I think now it's actually very, because like you have like research methods that are basically known to everyone, and you
Hmm.
have research questions that like basically the entire academic society are very desperate to find out. So
Hmm.
when you put these two together, people get the same ideas, and it's literally like a race. You pre like people like rush to preprint their good ideas and this sort of stuff, and so yeah, basically that's actually true. And there are examples that like my classmates have told me, like their seniors in the lab got their had a very promising project that was getting good results, and actually only to find that because they didn't really publish it in time, another team with very similar like ideas that published their results, which were also very promising and just kind of beat you to it. And in that case, you do have like the kind of pressure to just do things more efficiently, I guess. And I think it's not just the academic context. I don't know. People like my classmates and my friends, some people like worked are like kind of pursuing like their education in finance and that sort of thing. I think it's even more of a dog eat dog scenario in their case.
What's a ducky
And
dog? I've never heard of that.
um it's kind of like just a very a competitive environment. Like you have like
Um,
adapt to survive, that sort of thing, like a jungle. I think that's
right.
basically what it means.
You mean like medical students like learning about like finances and other disciplines as well?
No, it's
No.
like my classmates in high school, my friends.
Right. Like
Mhm.
finance, right. So like the other disciplines.
Yeah, the other disciplines.
How many hours of sleep do you get?
Um, Actually, I do sleep a lot. Like,
Right. That's good to know.
it kind of, yeah, it did. I'm actually not at like the most like stressful or like the peak of my workload yet, because my education
Mm.
basically, the first 2 years of my education covers the basic natural sciences. We learn about like math, physics, chemistry, biochem, organic chemistry, this sort of thing in our first 2 years. And we were just kind of dipping slightly into medical fields, but not completely. So the more stressful, like the workload comes later, like when you're actually moving to the medical campus, that like kind of, I think that's going to be challenging. So for the first 2 years, basically, I generally sleep a lot. I I I don't really like, people have like final months or final seasons where like when you're like when the finals are approaching, you spend a lot of excessive time like revising and that sort of stuff. People like pull all-nighters.
Hmm.
They just stay up all night studying. But I don't really do that. So basically, how much time, I guess, during regular like when there's no test coming up, I guess like probably 8 hours. Even like with tests, probably 7 to 8. There's not much of a difference. I think with 8 hours of sleep, like there's still enough time left for you to do a lot of things. And
Mm.
it's very funny because actually, people like generally think like during the lockdown, people stay in a lot more and they get a lot more sleep because you don't have to run around more. I think
Uh-huh.
actually for me, the pandemic kind of messed up my schedule. I actually slept a lot less due to that. There's always the thought that maybe I could like get a bit more work down, get a bit more work done, and it's probably not going to matter because I'm going to wake up late anyways. I don't have to walk to the classroom. I just wake up. My breakfast is going to be delivered to my doorsteps, and then I'm gonna eat, and then I'm just going to take the class in my own like from in the comfort of my own dorm. So
Yeah.
that actually messed up my schedule. So during the pandemic, I say I occasionally sleep for like 5 4 hours. That's just very occasionally, but that has basically never happened before in like literally the last 19 years of my life. So that's actually a very interesting experience to get these kind of like sleep deprivation that I'm
Right.
almost like doomed to get later on in my medical education.
Right. It's good to know like you're sleeping enough. Like
Yeah,
wow.
I do sleep a lot. I
Right.
Yeah.
Your working schedule then, like your sleep schedule, it's somewhat been affected. But then has your
Mhm.
work schedule been like seriously affected as well during the pandemic?
Well, I think my work schedule has generally been like it's not as like rhythmic, it's not as regular as it used to be, but I I don't know if I got more work done in like during the pandemic, because there was like a time when you can't go outside anyway, so you naturally spent more time like between classes, like going through materials, like doing like a little bit of extra reading and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
um Basically it impacts me like the most is or impacts me the most is that you don't really get up as early as you used to, and um that way actually it just occurred to me that you basically lost the most valuable period in your daily routine, like the only bit of time that you're like your mind is at its quickest, and there's basically there's no extra work that has to be done. You don't actually have to like think about what you've just learned and etc. It's just a period of time where you can freely spend on whatever you think is most important to you. I think that work period is actually very important, and it's just basically because you're people, especially I get lazier during the
Mhm.
pandemic. I as I like talked about, it's about like you don't have to wake up earlier to go to the classroom. And in that case, it's just so much harder, especially like when you're taking classes in your own dorm. It's just so much harder for you to find that kind of effort to get up like 1 hour before the class. I just generally just wake up like 10
Right
minutes
before.
before, just yeah, just in time to log on to like tested meetings and
Mm.
that sort of thing. But back when like back when you go to your classes, I was think about like mm, how it's not really good for you to just like directly have breakfast and then go to class, because it's like digestively it's a lot of pressure, and also it
Right.
just puts you in a general sleepy state after like when you just had when you just ate and then you're sitting in class, you're thinking it just so back then my routine would be to get up earlier and just generally early enough to for you to actually arrive like half an hour or so like before class, and then you just sit there. This half an hour is actually kind of important. You just go over a lot of the things that like the things you didn't really cover yesterday or the things you're going to cover today. And I think that work period is actually a lot more important than I used to realize.
Mm.
So that's actually a very interesting thing I just discovered.
Right. Because Daisy told me you're a morning person. Like you go to
Yeah.
school in the morning as well. Like you and I are
I'm
sort of
I'm
mental in
also
that sense.
I'm also like I'm occasionally also a night owl, so it's just
Okay.
yeah. So I don't know, but generally if like there's a resolution about like what I would prefer to be, I think I would just be more of a morning person. I think when you're a night owl, you're basically your brain is like pumping itself full of chemicals that makes you want to sleep and work less efficiently. So it's just optimal efficiency is achieved in the morning. I think that holds true, but I previously haven't been able to do as well in terms of like getting up early and that sort of thing. I think it's important though.
Mm. To wake up early, you mean?
Yeah, to wake up early. I think it's sort of a resolution that I'm hoping to kind of like live up to.
Right. The next semester, hopefully when if
Yeah, exactly.
right. I thought you were like a really morning person as well. Like Daisy told me you go jogging in the morning. Like she was like, why would you do
Oh,
this to
that's
yourself? And I told her, yeah, I
that.
sort of do that crazy thing as well. Just wake up.
Yeah, I think in terms of like physical exercise, I have to take a lead from your book. I wasn't like really physically active like outside of sports I do, but jogging's a resolution I took up like before summer, like when I came back home from school, and I thought like um I realized that I actually lost a lot of weight during the pandemic, and just overall, I look back at like what I was doing when I was in my dorm, and I thought it wasn't really healthy enough, so I
Mm.
decided to do that. It didn't really last like as long as I wanted it to be, because it soon got very hot in Shanghai. Like it
Right.
was so hot that when you wake up like 7 or 8 in the morning, it was already like kind of, yeah. So it was, and the air was like humid as well. So when you go
Mm.
jogging in the morning, it's basically like you have to take a shower going back home. So that didn't really last as long as I wanted.
Mm. But otherwise, like I guess you get your soccer and other activities back in now. Now there's like
Yeah,
less restrictions. There are less restrictions.
yeah, fortunately.
Um, like how about like that's in college. In high school, well, you said like it wasn't as in like you didn't like so-called, well, I don't know the standards like of hardworking. What maybe that differentiates between you and me. But then how about high school? Because I remember you telling me that, like those are pretty joyful, happy days. Like, just
Yeah, it
roaming
was.
around the like always back to the soccer pitch, be it it's for soccer, like it's just like that. But that's not exactly how I imagined like, what med students would be doing. I thought like everyone, because for me at my school, I look at the science classes, what like they were doing in their like senior years. Like we do like 6 years in the same secondary school. So we don't have like
Mm-hmm.
senior high, like junior high. We like the same group
Oh,
of people. We
uh-huh.
are together in the same school. But then in the senior classes, when we've selected our electives, I look at them and they're always in their classrooms, just like bookworms, like the typical what you call, and like staying like during the lunches, like we would go out for lunch outside of school, and then they'd be in their classrooms, like studying or whatever. And like maybe the teacher's teaching, and but nobody's listening. They're all doing like their own like extra work or something. So, but then you
Wow.
don't, yeah. So you don't think like that was the case back then.
Well, I have to say that actually I was also in like the science classes. So basically,
Uh-huh.
people who I played soccer with were also people from science classes, and these
Right.
people like remain as like great friends to this day. I think generally like the workload for us, especially when like the Gaokao was like coming up, it was also like a great workload, and like respectively we had like academic competitions, like there were like competitions in chemistry, in physics, math that people have to study extra for.
Mm.
But somehow I think it doesn't really conflict with like playing soccer. And I think playing soccer was actually something that was very good for, like as we previously talked about, stress, because you
Right.
get to make friends outside of the general like competitive environment. You get to socialize a lot more, and it's there was actually this something that I'm not especially proud of. Especially, we play a lot more soccer, especially when exams are coming up. But that doesn't
Oh
really
yeah.
mean like you don't revise. It's more about like when you're revising to this point that you're kind of anxious about like would I do well tomorrow, or like am I doing enough, or like how the hell am I going to remember this sort of stuff tomorrow? And when you're thinking about this sort of thing, I think it's important to just like immediately cut it out by like going to a soccer pitch and playing with your friends. Because it's not only like sports are stress relieving, it's also the fact that um, you talk with your friends and you realize that they're also suffering from the same sort of stress, and it's a lot more beneficial. So we did spend a lot of time on the soccer pitch in high school, and I don't know if it like makes us less like hard workers in that sense, but I do think it just makes your school life a lot easier than like it could have been if you don't have sports or stuff like that to keep you going.
Just go to the pitch, hit a couple of
Yeah, go to
bangers,
the
and
pitch.
then back to work.
Yeah, our high school had like a very good pitch. It was
Mm.
decent, and it was like a lot better than what the university has. You've seen the pitch; it's like
I've
just
never seen it.
average.
Like I've only seen photos of it,
Oh,
right? I've never
right,
even
but
seen it.
it's
Right, right, right.
yeah, it's just average. Yeah.
Right. How about um right, let me get to like let me switch up the topic. How
Hmm.
about like because your parents are in the medical field as well, do you think if that they weren't that you would not be doing like, getting into the medical field yourself as well? Do you think they are in a way that pressure that pushed you in this direction or
That's actually interesting because like that's something I would think a lot about, like when I'm choosing my majors, especially when I'm like thinking about getting into med school after like my exam results came out. I would think about
mm,
like whether this is because my parents like they're kind of working in the biomedical field, and whether like this is somehow due to like am I doing something that's derivative from my parents, because I think for like general teenagers it's something, it's kind of like a horrifying thought. Am I just going to become exactly like them, or is it am I not becoming like sufficiently independent? I think generally, even though I would be lying if I said that my parents didn't really kind of groom me for like becoming a doctor. They kind of did, but at the end of the day, it was an autonomous decision. I think it was, like without them, I would probably still choose medical fields, even though I had like a lot of other interests I was thinking about. I sort of thought about like pursuing law, even though I didn't really. I was like a science student, like growing up. And I also thought about, for instance, like what would happen if I got into finance? What would happen if I pursued like a fundamental like natural science and tried to like become an academic? But um, I think finally what kind of drove me to become a doctor was like, first of all, I think it kind of fits. I do like identify very strongly with what medicine is doing. And I think that's the part where my parents actually came in. I think they did a lot of like prep work for me in that sort of sense, because
right?
like we used to have community service in middle school, and when these community services came up, my parents would kind of like say, yeah, you can probably go to the hospital, like be like a kind of a guide volunteer for senior people who come to the hospital, or you can like kind of volunteer at these support groups with like hereditary diseases and this sort of thing. And I think that's actually something that made me kind of identify with what the doctors are doing. And also it's because like I kind of always felt it would be cool to become an academic, to always have something that gets you excited about in life. I think it's kind of it just brings a lot more purpose and like steady purpose that like from my perspective. I think it would be
Uh-huh.
good to always have like this sort of objective that's not really easily affected by what's going on in the outside world. And I think it's actually what I look most forward to like in medical field. It's the fact that you can become an academic while still having real world impact. And I think after I got to this level, like when I was contemplating what sort of direction I want to go later on, like in high school, I think it was at this point that I thought, yeah, I could become a doctor, even though it could be boring, because like in my family now, basically everyone's in the same field. Like there's no
Mm.
like cross dialogues. People talk about the exact same things. Like, but still, I think it's also sort of good in that sort of sense. Like you, like there won't be a lot of generation gaps. Like there's always a common topic to talk about. If you don't like, if my parents don't understand like a lot of the things they think it's like young people stuff, they can always talk about like what's going on in their own
Mm.
majors. Yeah,
Right.
so it also has benefits. Yeah.
The I remember you saying like your parents are in the academic like more research field. Yeah,
My parents were, yeah.
right. So you mentioned like that scared kind of scared you away from like the research. This because like that's why you got into like is that why like clinical medicine like are those two things
Exactly. Yeah,
different?
exactly. I think they also they scared me away like both by telling me vocally that like research isn't as fun as you think it would be, and also like through demonstration, because like it's kind of boring like being an academic. I don't It's kind of boring for me. I don't know if it is for them, because they seem to enjoy what they're doing, but like for me it's like their work is like constantly just like spending a lot of time at your laptops and just like reading through things. And I think like there's a lot of discouraging things like in when you're doing research that could like potentially be unsettling for you. And that's exactly why I think it was very important for me to be and and like to have a lot of like real world impact apart from being an academic. And because like it would be like unfair to say that they didn't really influence me at all, because I do also identify with being an academic. I think what they're doing is cool. So but it also made me think that I had to have like a little bit of extra something outside of that kind of life. And I think that's what like clinical medicine can kind of offer you, even though it could be like a very full life. You have to do all of these things at the same time, but I think it's actually good.
Right. Fudan like offers like clinical medicine and then does it other types of medicine as
Yeah, it
well?
does. Hmm.
Okay.
We have like apart from clinical, a very like massive field is just basically fundamental research. It also occupies like half of the population of med school, where like students are really they're expected to intern at hospitals, but only because like it's kind of mandatory for all medical students. But later on in life, they're going to spend more of their time in the lab and doing
Hmm.
research work.
Well, you guys have to go into the lab like during your education, but then you might like you'd be walking into like that surgery room or whatever.
Yeah,
Right. Hopefully
yeah. For
that
us,
does
it's
not
more.
sound well. You want to go into a surgery room. So like because like one of the like burdens of a doctor, I suppose like from watching videos of like some medical students talking about it, like I guess death is like or like it's like a well major element. I don't know if I could call it that. It's a part of being a doctor, I guess. Like I don't know if they get used to it, like seeing people like go passing away or stuff like that. So I wondered like on that side, like I don't know if you could call it the mental side, like are you sort of prepared to like go into that as well? Like you have to like sort of I see like these videos about like these medical students they have to go through training that to like sort of explain to the patients like it's terminal or something like they have these sorts of sessions as well. I don't know, like, would that be any sort of like burden on you guys knowing you have to do that or
Well, I think like for me, I'm still like way too junior to talk about these sort of things because I haven't really got
right?
to intern at hospitals yet. But when you actually do, I think well, it could be irresponsible for me to talk about this sort of thing, but we've also received like humanity like disciplines in the humanities. We received a sort of education that could like that was like these curriculums were intended to help us like prep for these things later on. But I think that's
Mm,
actually a major aspect of like medicine in China in terms of like I think we don't really prepare like med students enough for this sort of like patient dialogues and these things, because when you look at like pre-med materials in like for instance in Harvard in these very prestigious med schools, they actually put a lot of emphasis on telling you or giving you a clear guideline about how you're actually going to consider the interest of your patients and that sort of thing, like how you actually deliver these news. I think
mm,
from what I've learned from like my senior students, like they told me about like what it's like to be interning at hospitals. It's either that you don't have a lot of involvement in this sort of thing. There's going to be like the registrars, the MOs who are going to be delivering these bad news. But also it's going to be like they don't really know themselves how they would deliver this sort of news. So basically, I think no one really prepares you for it, and like it's up to yourself to think like exactly how I can do this better, or like am I going to be okay with the fact that I'm not going to succeed as much as I like to. I think everyone goes into medicine thinking about like I can have a lot of achievement in like, but it's really about like what kind of discipline you choose. I think in some like disciplines, like if you're in like dentistry and that sort of thing, you don't really have to deal with this pressure. But
Yeah.
if you're like an oncologist, then probably like the death or like treatment failures are something that's going to you're going to have to deal with at some point. So but that's just me speaking from a very, very junior perspective. I haven't had the time to actually really contemplate this sort of thing yet.
Mm, right. Maybe you'll come back a few years, talk about it again.
Yeah,
Like
exactly. Yeah, I
completely
actually look
different
forward to.
perspectives.
Yeah,
Because it's 8 years. So like,
probably around 5. I'll actually get to talk about this a little bit because we will be like starting our internship and getting like a mentor to like educate you in your clinical disciplines. So
in your 5th year.
in your 5th year, yeah.
Okay. Well, we actually touched a bit on like, I think it's the last question,
Hmm.
about like, medicine in like different places. So you probably know this as well. If you don't, now you do, like in that message. Like I was talking about
Yeah.
like how Fudan University is now like recognized as like the first university in Hong Kong, like, med school graduates from Fudan, their qualifications are recognized. So I guess it's like a bit too early to talk about like future plans at all. You're only like you just finished your 2nd year and all that. But like, do you ever like consider, I guess, coming over here? And have you come to Hong Kong before on other
Actually,
occasions?
actually not really, but I was actually I had a good feeling about the city. I actually applied for like a Hong Kong university before, like in my high school final year.
Right.
I was trying to get into the MBBS program, but they didn't
Yeah.
really offer me that. Yeah, um they offered me the law program. So that was also like a very interesting like decision I had to make. But overall I think I actually like had a very good feeling about the city overall. So um practicing in Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
I think it's like I think it's a similar decision you have to make when people also talk about like practicing in Singapore. We used to like have people go there as well, or like
Uh-huh.
practicing in the US or the UK. Generally speaking, a lot of people like a lot of my classmates actually they do talk about at this point they do think would it be better like if I go abroad because I think it's no secret like in mainland China basically the NHS doesn't necessarily pay as well as like when you get to Hong Kong or like when you get to the US. It's sort of a better paying job, but more
Mm.
importantly, the workload is like kind of like way bigger than like when in the US or in Hong Kong where you have like less patients overall. So I think that's a consideration for everyone, and currently I'm not really sure, but I think there's a lot of considerations that people have told me. For instance, it's about like what kind of doctor you want to become. If you want to become like a prestigious like research doctor in that sense, then probably it's better for you to remain in China because you have a lot more resources that's going to be oriented towards your local doctors, and like you
Mm.
can just go directly into this sort of track, and then like your mentor and these people are going to like just guide you in this into this sort of orientation. And also because in China doctors are like kind of like hospital systems put a lot of emphasis on like doing research, so it's kind of this is how it works in China. If you're okay with that, then I guess like staying in China is probably better because when you get to I don't know if it holds true in Hong Kong, but in the
Mhm.
US I've heard from like a lot of seniors that in the US basically if you want to get into a very prestigious hospital in a like affiliated to a university, then you probably have to do a lot better than the locals. I don't know if like in Hong Kong you have to get into like these hospitals that belong to like HKU. If you want to like go to these hospitals, you're going to have to do a lot better. But I think that just makes it like a lot more pressuring, especially in Hong Kong where you get like tip top students going into med school. This like it's going to be way more competitive. And there's also the other path, which I think we also like mentioned a lot, like when I talk about Isaac going to UK.
Mhm.
It's like just becoming a complete like a clinical doctor, a clinical physician who focuses a lot more like on patients. I think
Mm.
in that sense, it's a lot more freeing. Like you can be like wherever you want in this world and you can like still find a job. And I think at this point, like if you go to a hospital which doesn't have that much workload, it's also beneficial for you can spend a lot more time on a patient. And because Isaac also told me this when we were talking about this sort of thing, he said that doctors like he's actually like doctors in the Hong Kong or US health system are tend to be like a lot more careful with their exams, their tests for patients. They like generally prescribe for a lot more tests before they actually settle upon their final diagnosis. I think that's kind of like a luxury you only have when you have like less patients and you can spend more time on them. In China, it's more of a pressured workload under which you
Mm.
like might not actually spend sufficient time on your patient. And yeah, it's kind of like about two different lives you're choosing. And even though I'm in my second year, it's actually pretty important for you to make up your mind as soon as you can, because if you want to go to the US or Hong Kong, basically, you have to get ready for the test there. And I think I'm pretty sure like it's pretty similar in Hong Kong. You have to take these tests in English, so you probably have to take your courses and get familiarized with that as soon as possible. In China, the Chinese education, like medical education, also is like semi-English, but it's not really that much focusing on like the English courses. So it's kind of like two different courses. You have to get ready for both if you haven't made up your mind yet.
Right. Your readings are in English, but is it?
Yeah.
And then that's
Um,
like the semi-English part.
that's the semi. I think our readings are it actually depends on different courses. Like some
Oh.
teachers focus a bit more and like they give you like English materials they probably teach in Chinese. And other
Mm.
teachers probably have like English PowerPoints. They have English slides, but also their teachings are in semi-English only. It's
Mm.
just basically like that. But like when you get to your secondary education, you still have to read a lot of your courses in English as well, because they're going to be more advanced. And yeah.
I've heard like from someone like this now that this policy has like passed, that like because you guys have like this 5 year, 6 year, and like 8 year clinical medicine programs, and I don't know like the other ones, but I suppose like I don't exactly know like which one they're like this policy is for, because they told me like on the 6 year batch of like clinical medicine students, they do their courses entirely in English. And like those are the
Mm.
students they would be accepting. I'm not exactly sure. I'm
Oh, actually, that's actually interesting because 6 year students are like what we call the MBBS program. Like they're
right.
international students. They come here and they receive like 2 years of fundamental education, just like we do, and then they receive most of their courses in English at med school, and then finally they leave with a medical bachelor, like with a bachelor degree in medicine. Um, I think yeah, it makes sense for them to be accepted towards like the 6 year students because essentially they don't have to learn that they they don't have to pass the language barriers. Their courses were already they're basically international doctors.
Okay.
Um, for like 8 year or 5 year students, I think there are options. Like for 5 year students, you can pursue your graduate studies like just directly in Hong Kong. There's been like examples of that. If your graduate studies are in Hong Kong, then basically they do accept you as a doctor there, assuming you pass the test, of course. For 8 year students, um, yeah, so it's true. We don't really like for 8 year students who don't really lead the track and go abroad. basically were like kind of used to just being directly pushed into the local NHS system. I don't know if like there's also options where you can like transfer your degree to Hong Kong and be accepted there. I think it also makes sense if they don't really like accept 8-year students, but I'm not really sure.
Right. I guess as you don't know, like maybe as you get to closer to like those like your 6th or 5th year, like I guess you
Yeah,
more.
I'll probably know a lot more
Yeah.
about that. Yeah.
Right. But I think that's like all the questions, I think.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Yes.
like yeah. So anything at all you want to say, like to me or to the audience or to whatever, like be it advice or shout outs or whatever. Yeah, here's your chance.
Well, not a lot of personal stuff, but I think it's just like a really good series that like Michael's doing right now, like in terms of interviewing like students from Fudan. I think it's really interesting, and for people who might be watching, I don't know if I have to say this, but yeah, it's recommended you like watch other of his like all his other videos. I think they're really interesting and really cool. Yeah, that's basically it.
All right, then hopefully we get to like, this is the first time, this is not even face to face, it sort of is virtually. Hopefully we get to like, meet offline, soon. Like if ever, not if
Well,
I ever, because like
yeah,
I know I'll definitely be coming over back to Shanghai to visit you guys if you guys even have time for that.
of course, of course we do.
Yeah, like
And yeah, sure,
yeah, if you ever
of
come over to Hong
course.
Kong, it's just one call away. Just hit me up. We could meet up.
Yeah, exactly. I actually, I don't know. I think it's just mainly the pandemic. If like all of this passes away, I think the first city I would like to drop a visit to is Hong Kong, because like in summer I went to Chongqing, and Isaac said that the roads there reminds him a lot of Hong Kong. Like basically it's a city that has like that it's just basically, it feels very cyberpunk. The city like, and I think it'll be really cool to actually go there in person. And about like virtually meeting, I think like it doesn't necessarily have to wait. Like next term, if you're available, like Fed's activities, we could always like.
Yeah.
I don't even know whether we would be having offline activities next term. Like it could be
I
like
am
very
praying from the bottom of my heart for all of us that we get
yeah,
have like offline ones
have
again.
offline. Yeah. Either way, it'll be great if you can join us from like Tencent meeting. Like
yeah, if you guys let me, then of course I like
oh,
whenever I'm free, I
definitely.
just jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like a very important member of the society.
Wow.
Of course, yeah.
Exchange student, then prestigious member in FedSearch. Wow. Cannot believe this.
Yeah, you are. 我感觉在复旦校内，大家对于就交换生、留学生是有就是不太了解，有那种 myth，就是像比如说，就是我们特别熟的，一般是语言上都很过关的那种，你会知道，就是其他就他们会有自己的 circles，然后他们比如说可能下了课之后去干什么，我们也不了解。我们特别熟的人，像比如说你普通话讲的非常好，还有就是像我们踢球的还有一个冰岛人，一个哲学系的学生，他的普通话讲的就是他有北京口音，这个人，所以就。这样的会有 language barriers， 我觉得就是跟其他人，我们也不知道他们在干什么。
应该没障碍啊，他们就我那个宿舍里那台湾的学生应该没问题嘛，但相对感觉他们就是比较交换生的一起玩，总是就比较
是的，是的。
但我的 mentality 就是我去。Direct message you guys on WeChat 就是 like a madman， 就是just randomly send you some。没有，就是那 Daisy 就是我第一个好像发你们的视频就是一个 duck video， 算是
duck videos， 他以为发错了，Daisy 跟我说他以为发错了。 我觉得很可爱。
对对对，就我 I yeah，but I'm like，就我觉得就你都来到了，那你真的你不好好珍惜，那就是 I
对，
can
会有
do
遗
my
憾。
part, right? If I do my part,
嗯
like of course this I always say I'm very lucky. 就是 you guys have to be nice enough, to acknowledge me at least, and then but at
嗯
the same time, like if I reached out and no one ever responded, like I could still there are no regrets. I tried. 但如果没有，
是，
就是 it's pandemic, it's excuses. I just lie here and I don't know what I'm doing with my life. I don't like speak up in like those translation classes which I'm bad at. 我可以这样摆烂，但我觉得就是那个复旦就认识了你们，然后整体的氛围就是把我，就是让我知道就是天高地厚，就是那种感觉。
哪有？
就是
不过
我来之前真的觉得就是like I'm not trying to sound cocky, but I thought I was like, I was okay, I thought, and then I came here and I was
但
like, holy crap, what like this is like, you know, the people I'm dealing with，就是那种感觉。
不，我觉得你就是 in terms of mentality，真的你比很多就是我身边的人，包括肯定比我自己，就是要强大很多。因为我在 pandemic 期间，就是我觉得很大程度上就是当你很 outgoing 的时候，大家还是很愿意就是去交朋友的。这样的人，其实在我不知道是内地学生还是什么，就在我感觉在我们生活中还相对比较少一点。就是大家交友的时候还是会比较谨慎、比较内向、比较就是有心理负担之类的这种东西。有一个没有心理负担，这个简直是就是对于你来讲，你要做的事情太少了，你只需要就是这个是非常愉悦的一个过程，就是和这样的人交流，真的是这样。
我以前我肯定是没法跟你们比的。我记得我香港高考的时候，我备考方法是怎样的？就是我一天就是6点钟起床，我第一件事就是吃早餐嘛。然后我吃早餐的时候就会在电视看那个 YouTube 看，就是那个清华的马来西亚的留学生，然
嗯，
后他就是不停学习那样。然后我吃了1个小时到了早餐，我就想，我自己学了，我自己也学了很多，是没学过。Hey homies, I hope you enjoyed this clip. If you did, here's a full playlist of sharings from other top-notch people I've met. Like, comment, subscribe, 一键3连, and I will see you in the next one. Alright guys, peace.